The coffee was still steaming in my favorite ceramic mug when Nicole dropped those words like a stone into still water. Mom, let's be realistic here. Old women don't travel. I was standing at my kitchen window, looking out at the dogwood tree that Margaret had helped me plant 15 years ago, its branches now thick and strong against the October sky. The morning light filtered through the gauze curtains I'd sewn myself during one of those long, lonely evenings after Harold passed. Nicole sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through her phone while picking at the blueberry muffin I'd made from scratch at 5 in the morning because I couldn't sleep. What did you just say? I turned around slowly, my hand tightening around the mug's handle. Nicole didn't even look up. I said, old women don't travel, Mom. It's just not practical. Think about your blood pressure medication, your arthritis, those dizzy spells you had last month. You can barely handle grocery shopping at Kroger without getting overwhelmed. The dismissive tone in her voice hit me harder than the words themselves. At 42, Nicole had inherited her father's practicality, but none of his warmth. She worked as a regional manager for some insurance company, wore sharp business suits that made her look older than her years, and spoke to everyone, including her own mother, like they were incompetent employees who needed constant supervision. I was just mentioning that maybe someday I'd like to see Paris, I said quietly, setting my mug down on the counter with more force than necessary. Margaret always said the Louvre was magical in the afternoon light. Nicole finally looked up, her expression a mixture of exasperation and pity that I'd grown to recognize over the years. Mom, Aunt Margaret died 3 years ago. You need to stop living in these fantasies about what she would have wanted. You're 63 years old. You've never been on a plane by yourself. You get anxious ordering at new restaurants. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. Nicole had a talent for making me feel small, for reducing my dreams to the size of her narrow expectations. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that upstairs in my bedroom, tucked inside the pages of my old copy of Diggy, Gone with the Wind, was a first-class ticket to Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. Margaret had bought it for me 6 months before she passed, during one of her final visits to Richmond. She'd been sitting right here at this same kitchen table, her thin hands wrapped around a cup of Earl Grey tea, when she'd pulled the ticket from her purse with a mischievous smile that reminded me of our childhood. Evie, she'd said, using the nickname only she was allowed to use, promise me something. When I'm gone, and when you're ready, you'll use this. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. Not Nicole, not your own fears, not anyone. I protested. Of course. The ticket had cost a fortune, over $3,000 for first-class accommodations. Margaret had already been dealing with mounting medical bills from her cancer treatments, but she'd waved away my concerns with the same imperial gesture she'd used since we were girls. Money means nothing if you don't use it for joy, she'd said. I've seen enough of the world for both of us. Now it's your turn. The ticket was dated for November 15th, just 3 weeks away. I'd been staring at it every morning for months, touching the edges that had grown soft from my nervous handling, wondering if I'd ever be brave enough to actually use it. Nicole was still talking, her voice cutting through my memories like a blade. I mean, seriously, Mom, what would you even do in Paris? You don't speak French. You've never been comfortable in crowds. Remember how you had that panic attack at Nicole's wedding reception? There were only 80 people there. That stung because it was true. I had struggled at the reception, overwhelmed by the noise and the strangers, and the feeling that I didn't quite belong anywhere. But that was 4 years ago, right after Harold's death, when everything felt too bright and too loud and too much. People change, Nicole, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. She laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Mom, you haven't changed in 20 years. You order the same thing at every restaurant we've ever been to. You watch the same 3 channels on television. You've lived in this same house since 1987. Change isn't exactly your strong suit. I walked over to the table and sat down across from her, studying her face. When had she become so hard? When had my little girl, who used to beg me to read her stories about brave princesses and magical adventures, turned into this woman who spoke to me like I was a burden she had to manage? What if I wanted to try something different? I asked. What if I wanted to surprise you? Nicole set down her phone and looked at me with the kind of patient expression people reserve for children and the elderly. Mom, I love you. But surprises aren't really your thing either. The most adventurous thing you've done since Dad died was switching from Folgers to Maxwell House coffee. The casual cruelty of that comment took my breath away. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of Nicole. Not when she was looking at me like I was a problem to be solved, rather than a person with feelings and dreams and a whole lifetime of experiences she'd never bothered to ask about. Your father supported my dreams, I said quietly. Dad was a dreamer too, Nicole replied. Not unkindly, but not warmly either. That's why you guys never saved enough for retirement. That's why I have to worry about whether you're going to be able to afford this house when your Social Security isn't enough anymore. There it was, the guilt trip that Nicole had perfected over the years. Every conversation eventually circled back to my perceived inadequacies, my failures as an adult, my inability to handle the basic responsibilities of independent living. What Nicole didn't know was that Harold and I had been better savers than she realized. What she didn't know was that Margaret had left me a small inheritance when she passed. What she didn't know was that I'd been carefully managing my finances for the past 3 years, learning about investments and budgeting and all the things she assumed I was too old or too scattered to understand. But I didn't tell her any of that. Instead, I stood up and started clearing away the breakfast dishes, my movements deliberate and controlled. You're probably right, I said, not meeting her eyes. Old women don't travel. Nicole seemed satisfied by my capitulation. She picked up her phone again, already moving on to whatever crisis was demanding her attention at work. I'm glad you understand, Mom. I just want what's best for you. Maybe we can plan a nice weekend trip to Virginia Beach next spring. Something manageable. Virginia Beach, 2 hours away, safe, predictable, filled with families and retirees doing exactly what was expected of them. The thought made my stomach turn. After Nicole left for work, she'd been staying with me for the past week while her apartment was being fumigated. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. Each step felt heavier than usual, weighted down by the conversation and the familiar ache of being misunderstood by the person who should know me best. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled out the worn copy of Gone with the Wind. The ticket slipped out easily, landing in my lap like a whispered promise. First class, Seat 2A, November 15th, departing at 6:45 p.m. from Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. I ran my fingers over Margaret's neat handwriting on the sticky note she'd attached. For Evie, because the world is waiting, and so are you. For the first time since Nicole had spoken those crushing words downstairs, I smiled. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called in sick to my part-time job at the Richmond Public Library. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was sick, just not in the way Mrs. Henderson would understand when I left the message on her voicemail. I was sick of being treated like a fragile ornament, sick of having my dreams dismissed before I could even voice them properly, sick of living a life that felt smaller each day. Instead of shelving books and helping teenagers find research materials for their history papers, I drove downtown to the passport office. I'd renewed my passport 2 years ago during one of those optimistic moments when I thought Harold and I might finally take that European cruise we'd always talked about. Then the diagnosis came, and the treatments, and suddenly all our dreams were put on hold indefinitely. The parking meter ate 3/4 before I realized I was feeding it wrong. Nicole's voice echoing in my head about how I got flustered in unfamiliar situations. But I made myself slow down, take a breath, and try again. This time it worked perfectly. The passport was still valid, the photograph showing a slightly younger version of myself with more hope in her eyes. I tucked it carefully into my purse, right next to the plane ticket that I'd started carrying everywhere like a talisman. My next stop was the Bank of America branch, where I'd been doing business for 37 years. Janet Morrison, who'd started as a teller around the same time I'd opened my account, was now a branch manager with graying hair and laugh lines that mirrored my own. "Evelyn, how lovely to see you," she said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from her desk. "What can I help you with today?" I took a deep breath. I need to access some of my savings. I'm planning a trip. Janet's eyebrows rose slightly. but she maintained her professional composure. Of course. Where are you thinking of going? Paris. The word felt foreign on my tongue, like I was trying on a new identity. How wonderful. Janet's enthusiasm seemed genuine. My daughter went there for her honeymoon last year. She said it was absolutely magical. The food, the museums, the architecture. She couldn't stop talking about it for months. I found myself smiling for the first time in days. That's exactly what my sister Margaret used to say. She went there several times before she passed. As Janet pulled up my account information on her computer, I noticed she wasn't looking at me with the kind of concerned paternalism that Nicole always used. She wasn't questioning whether I was capable of international travel or suggesting I stick to somewhere safer and closer to home. She was treating me like an adult woman making an adult decision about her own life and money. You know, Evelyn, I have to say I admire you for doing this, Janet said as she processed my withdrawal request. Too many people wait until it's too late to follow their dreams. My mother always said she wanted to see the northern lights, but she kept putting it off. After she passed, I promised myself I wouldn't make the same mistake. The money, $3,500 in traveler's checks and cash, felt substantial in my hands. It represented months of careful budgeting, small sacrifices, and the modest inheritance from Margaret that I hadn't touched until now. But for the first time, spending this money felt like an investment rather than an expense. On the way home, I stopped at Barnes & Noble and bought every travel guide to Paris they had in stock, plus a basic French phrase book and a journal with a cover that showed the Eiffel Tower at sunset. The young man at the counter, probably around Nicole's age, smiled at my purchases. Planning a trip to Paris? That's awesome. My girlfriend and I went last summer. If you want my advice, definitely check out this little cafe in Montmartre called Café des Deux Moulins. It's where they filmed parts of Amélie. I had no idea what Amélie was, but I appreciated that he was talking to me like a fellow traveler, rather than someone's confused grandmother who'd wandered into the wrong section of the store. When I got home, Nicole's car was already in the driveway. She'd gotten off work early, which usually meant she had some new concern about my well-being or my finances or my general inability to function without supervision. I hid my purchases in the trunk of my car and went inside, trying to look casual. "Mom, where were you?" Nicole called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that edge of worry that always made me feel guilty. "I called the library, and Mrs. Henderson said you were sick. Are you feeling all right? Do you need me to take you to Dr. Patterson?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired." I decided to take a personal day. Nicole appeared in the doorway, still wearing her work clothes, a navy blue blazer and matching skirt that made her look like she was always on her way to a business meeting. "Mom, you never take personal days. You went to work with pneumonia last winter. What's really going on?" The concern in her voice was genuine. I had to give her that. But it was the kind of concern you'd show for a pet or a small child, protective and slightly condescending. When was the last time Nicole had asked about my dreams, my interests, my thoughts about anything beyond my health, and my ability to manage daily tasks? "I just needed some time to think," I said. "Is that okay with you?" Nicole studied my face carefully, and for a moment I wondered if she could somehow see the secret I was carrying. But then she relaxed, apparently satisfied that I wasn't having some kind of medical emergency. "Of course it's okay. I just worry about you, that's all. Especially after yesterday's conversation about, travel and all that unrealistic stuff. I hope I didn't hurt your feelings." But she had hurt my feelings, and we both knew it. The difference was that Nicole seemed to think hurt feelings were a reasonable price to pay for keeping me safe and realistic. "I understand you're just looking out for me," I said, which was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. That evening, after Nicole went to bed, I spread my new travel guides across the kitchen table like a treasure map. The photographs were stunning. Cobblestone streets glistening with rain. Outdoor cafes filled with people who looked like they belonged in movies. Museums with ceilings so beautiful they could make you weep. I opened the French phrase book and started practicing basic words. Bonjour, merci, excusez-moi. My pronunciation was probably terrible, but there was something thrilling about the way the words felt in my mouth, like I was already becoming someone slightly different, someone more adventurous. I found a section in one of the guidebooks about traveling alone as an older woman. Instead of warnings and limitations, it was full of encouraging advice. Pack light, trust your instincts, don't be afraid to eat dinner alone, strike up conversations with fellow travelers. There were even testimonials from women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s who had taken solo trips to places I'd only seen in movies. At 72, I finally saw the sunrise over Machu Picchu, wrote one woman named Dorothy from Arizona. My children thought I was crazy, but it was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. Don't let anyone tell you you're too old for wonder. I read that sentence 3 times. Feeling something unlock in my chest, I pulled out the journal I'd bought and opened to the first blank page. For a moment, I just stared at it, trying to figure out how to begin. Then I picked up my pen and wrote, November 3rd, 3 weeks from today, I will board a plane to Paris. Nicole doesn't know. Nobody knows except me. I'm scared, but I'm more scared of staying exactly the same for the rest of my life. Margaret used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and doing the thing anyway. I think about her every day, about all the places she went and all the stories she told. She always made it sound so easy, so natural, like traveling was just another part of living. But maybe it is. Maybe the hard part isn't the traveling itself. Maybe the hard part is believing you deserve to do it. I paused, my pen hovering over the page, thinking about Nicole's words from yesterday. Old women don't travel. But what made a woman old? Was it a number? Was it an attitude? Was it giving up on the possibility that life could still surprise you? I wrote, I am 63 years old. I have silver hair and reading glasses and arthritis in my left knee. I get nervous in crowds sometimes, and I don't always understand how to use the self-checkout at the grocery store. But I also learned to use a computer when I was 55. I figured out online banking when I was 60. I read 47 books last year, and I still remember the name of every regular patron at the library. I am not old. I am just underestimated. The next morning brought rain, the kind of steady November drizzle that makes everything look gray and forgotten. Nicole had already left for work by the time I came downstairs, but she'd left a note propped against the coffee maker. Mom, please call if you need anything today. Maybe we can watch a movie tonight. Love you. The note was sweet, and I felt a pang of guilt about the secret I was keeping. But it was also a reminder of how she saw me, as someone who needed checking up on, someone whose day was so empty that watching television was the highlight. I made myself a cup of coffee and called the number I'd found in one of my travel guides the night before. Bonjour, Patricia speaking. This is European Travel Specialists. How may I help you today? Hello? I said, my voice stronger than I'd expected. My name is Evelyn Crawford. I have a ticket to Paris for November 15th, and I need help planning what to do when I get there. How exciting! Is this your first time in Paris? Yes, my first time anywhere, really. I'm 63, and I'm traveling alone. There was no pause, no concern, no suggestion that I might be biting off more than I could chew. Patricia launched into an enthusiastic description of all the possibilities. Walking tours designed for older travelers, cooking classes in English, day trips to the countryside, recommendations for safe neighborhoods and comfortable hotels. By the end of our 45-minute conversation, I had a tentative itinerary that made my heart race with excitement. A Seine River cruise on my first evening, a guided tour of the Louvre the next day, a cooking class where I'd learn to make authentic French pastries, a day trip to Versailles. One more thing, Patricia said before we hung up. I work with many solo female travelers, and I have to tell you, women your age are some of the most adventurous clients I have. You know what you like. You're not trying to impress anyone, and you appreciate experiences in a way that younger travelers sometimes miss. You're going to have a wonderful time. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long moment, feeling like I'd just had a conversation with a fortune teller who'd predicted a completely different future than the one I'd been imagining for myself. That afternoon, I drove to the mall and did something else I hadn't done in years. I bought new clothes, not sensible clothes in beige and navy blue, but a soft red sweater that made my complexion glow, a pair of comfortable walking shoes in actual leather, a scarf with a pattern of tiny Eiffel towers that would have made Margaret laugh with delight. The saleswoman at Nordstrom, a woman about my age named Carol, helped me pick out pieces that were both practical for travel and more stylish than anything I'd worn since Harold's funeral. "Are you going somewhere special?" she asked as I tried on a lightweight jacket that could be dressed up or down. "Paris," I said, and this time the word didn't feel foreign at all. "Oh, how wonderful! My husband and I went there for our 25th anniversary. You're going to love it. The people are so much friendlier than everyone says, especially if you try to speak a little French. Even if you butcher the pronunciation, they appreciate the effort. I bought everything: the sweater, the shoes, the scarf, the jacket, and a few other pieces that made me feel like the kind of woman who traveled to Paris on a whim. The total was more than I'd spent on clothes in the past 2 years, combined, but I didn't care. I was investing in a different version of myself. On the drive home, I called my friend Ruth Michaels, whom I'd known since our children were in elementary school together. Ruth was one of the few people in my life who still treated me like I had agency and intelligence. "Ruth, it's Evelyn. Are you busy?" "Never too busy for you, honey. What's going on?" I took a deep breath. "I'm going to Paris in 2 weeks, and I haven't told Nicole. I need to tell someone before I lose my nerve." There was a pause, and then Ruth started laughing. Not at me, but with genuine delight. "Evelyn Marie Crawford! You wonderful, sneaky woman! Tell me everything, Ruth listened to the entire story without interruption. The ticket from Margaret, Nicole's dismissive comments, my secret preparations. When I finished, there was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "Evelyn," she said finally, "I am so proud of you I could cry. Do you know how many times over the years I've watched Nicole treat you like you're made of tissue paper? And you've just accepted it. She means well," I said automatically, though the words felt hollow. "I'm sure she does. But meaning well and being right are 2 different things. Remember when we were 50 and took that weekend trip to Williamsburg? You navigated us through that terrible storm, found us a hotel when our reservation got cancelled, and talked our way into the best restaurant in town without a reservation. You're one of the most resourceful people I know." I had forgotten about that weekend. It was right after Harold's first heart attack, when I was feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about everything. Ruth had insisted we needed a girls' trip, and she'd been right. I'd felt so capable during those 2 days, so much like my old self. "That was different," I said. "That was just Virginia. Distance doesn't determine difficulty, honey. Competence is competence. And you, Evelyn Crawford, are competent." After we hung up, I felt lighter somehow, like Ruth had given me permission to believe in myself. That evening, when Nicole came home from work, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my travel guides spread out in front of me, no longer bothering to hide them. "What's all this?" Nicole asked, setting down her purse and peering over my shoulder. My heart started racing, but I kept my voice steady. "Just some reading material." Nicole picked up the Fodor's Guide to Paris, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern, to something that looked almost like panic. "Mom, what is this? Why do you have travel books about Paris?" This was it, the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. I could lie, make up some story about helping someone at the library plan their trip, or I could tell the truth and deal with whatever came next. "I'm planning a trip," I said simply. Nicole stared at me for a long moment, then sat down heavily in the chair across from me. "Mom, we talked about this. We agreed that international travel isn't realistic for you right now." "You talked," I corrected gently. "I listened. There's a difference." "Don't be ridiculous. You can't possibly be serious about this." Nicole's voice was rising, taking on the sharp edge it got when she felt like she was losing control of a situation. "Do you have any idea what's involved in international travel? The paperwork, the connections, the language barriers. You get overwhelmed ordering coffee at a new Starbucks." I felt the familiar flush of shame creeping up my neck, but this time I pushed back against it. "I've been researching it thoroughly. I have my passport. I've spoken with a travel agent. I've been learning basic French phrases." Nicole laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Learning French phrases? Mom, you still can't figure out how to use the voice commands on your phone. You think you're going to navigate a foreign country where you don't speak the language. Millions of people do it every day," I said, "including many people my age Those people have experience. They've traveled before. They are not— Nicole stopped herself, but I knew what she'd been about to say. They're not what, Nicole? Not old? Not incompetent? Not your mother? Nicole's face flushed. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling with how to voice her objections without sounding as harsh as she felt. I meant they're not people I love and worry about. They're not people whose safety is my responsibility. I'm 63 years old, I said. My safety is my responsibility. Not if something happens to you in a foreign country. Not if you have a medical emergency or get lost or— Nicole's voice cracked slightly. Mom, I can't lose you too. I know you think I'm being overprotective, but you're all I have left. There it was, the fear beneath the condescension. Nicole wasn't just trying to control me. She was trying to keep me safe in the only way she knew how. But her fear had become a cage, and I was suffocating inside it. Sweetheart, I said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. I understand that you're scared, but I can't live my entire life trying to prevent things that might never happen. Your father understood that. He would have wanted me to take this trip. Nicole pulled her hand away. Dad would have wanted you to be sensible. He would have wanted you to think about the practical implications instead of chasing some romantic fantasy about wandering around Europe like you're in a movie. Her words stung because there was a grain of truth in them. Harold had been practical, responsible, always thinking about the long-term consequences of every decision. But he'd also been the one who encouraged me to take that art class when I turned 50, who supported my decision to get my library science degree at 55, who always said that growing older didn't mean growing smaller. This isn't a fantasy, I said quietly. This is something I need to do. Nicole stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. Need to do? Mom, you need to take your medications and eat regular meals and keep your doctor appointments. You don't need to gallivant around Paris like some carefree teenager. Why not? The question came out sharper than I intended, surprising both of us. Why don't I get to be carefree? Why don't I get to do something just because it makes me happy instead of because it's sensible or practical or safe? Nicole stared at me. Because actions have consequences. Because if something happens to you, it doesn't just affect you. I'm the one who'll have to deal with it. I'm the one who'll have to fly to Paris to identify your body, or navigate foreign hospitals, or— Nicole Marie Crawford, I said, using the voice I'd perfected during her teenage years. That is enough. She stopped mid-sentence, startled by my tone. Do you hear yourself right now? You're already planning my funeral, and I haven't even left the country yet. Do you really think so little of me? Do you really believe I'm that incompetent? I don't think you're incompetent, Nicole said, but her voice lacked conviction. I think you're naive about what you're capable of handling. Based on what evidence? When was the last time you actually let me handle something difficult? When was the last time you watched me solve a problem instead of solving it for me? Nicole opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. I could see her searching through her memories, trying to find examples that would support her position. You had that panic attack at my wedding, she said finally, 4 years ago, right after your father died. When I was grieving and overwhelmed and trying to pretend I was fine for your sake, you got lost driving to the new Target. Once, because the GPS directions were wrong and I'd never been to that part of town. I figured it out and found my way home. You called me crying because you couldn't understand your Medicare forms. And then I made an appointment with an insurance counselor, worked through all the paperwork, and chose a supplemental plan that saved me $800 a year. Without your help. Nicole was quiet now, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to reconcile the capable woman sitting in front of her with the helpless mother she'd constructed in her mind. This is different, she said weakly. This is international travel. Yes, it is. And I'm going to do it whether you support me or not. The words hung in the air between us, heavier than I'd intended. Nicole's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, hurt, anger, and something that might have been respect. You're really going to do this, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, even though I think it's a terrible idea. Even though— Nicole sat back down, deflated. For a moment she looked younger than her 42 years, like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. When? She asked quietly. November 15th. That's 10 days away. Yes. How long have you been planning this? I hesitated, then decided on the complete truth. Margaret gave me the ticket 6 months before she died. I've been carrying it around ever since, trying to decide if I was brave enough to use it. Nicole's eyes widened. Aunt Margaret bought you a plane ticket, first class to Paris. She said it was her gift to me for all the years I took care of everyone else instead of myself. For the first time since this conversation began, Nicole looked uncertain instead of just angry. Margaret had always been her favorite aunt, the one who sent postcards from exotic locations and brought presents that sparkled. If Margaret had wanted me to take this trip, I can't believe she didn't tell me, Nicole said. She knew you'd try to talk me out of it. She was probably right. Nicole winced at that, but she didn't deny it. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us processing what had just happened. I'd never stood up to Nicole like that before, never pushed back so directly against her attempts to manage my life. It felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. Are you going alone? Nicole asked finally. Yes. For how long? 10 days. Where are you staying? I pulled out the confirmation papers I'd printed that morning. Hôtel des Grands Boulevards. It's in the 2nd arrondissement, walking distance from the Louvre and many of the major attractions. The travel agent says it's very safe for solo female travelers. Nicole looked at the papers like they might bite her. You've already booked everything. The hotel and a few tours. I wanted to have a structure but still leave room for spontaneous exploration. Spontaneous exploration? Nicole repeated the phrase like it was in a foreign language. Yes. Margaret always said the best travel experiences were the ones you couldn't plan for. Mom? Nicole started, then stopped. I could see her struggling with something. Probably the realization that I'd been making complex decisions and arrangements without her input or approval. I know this is hard for you, I said gently. I know you love me and you want to protect me. But protecting me from life isn't the same as protecting me from harm. Nicole was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded in her lap. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. I'm scared, she admitted. Not just about the trip. I'm scared that you're going to change, and when you come back, you won't need me anymore. The honesty in her voice broke something open in my chest. Oh, sweetheart, I will always need you, just not in the way you think I do. What do you mean? I need you to be my daughter, not my caretaker. I need you to share your life with me, not manage mine. I need you to believe in me, not just protect me. Nicole wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't know how to do that. Since Dad died, taking care of you it's been my job. It's how I show love. I know, but I'm ready to take care of myself again. And maybe that will free you up to figure out how to take care of yourself too. Nicole looked puzzled. What do you mean? When was the last time you did something just for joy? When was the last time you took a risk that had nothing to do with insurance policies or 5-year plans? When was the last time you surprised yourself? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The silence stretched between us, filled with all the conversations we'd never had about her own dreams and fears and desires. I wanted to learn pottery, she said suddenly. There's a studio downtown that offers evening classes. I drove by it every day for 6 months, thinking about signing up. What stopped you? I told myself I didn't have time, but really, I was scared I'd be terrible at it. Scared I'd fail at something that didn't matter for anything except making me happy. I felt my heart break a little for this woman who'd learned to fear joy as much as failure. Sign up for the class, I said. Mom, I'm serious. While I'm in Paris learning to make pastries and probably butchering the French language, you should be in Richmond learning to throw clay and probably getting covered in mud. We should both be trying new things. Nicole smiled, despite her tears. You really think I should? I think we've both been playing it too safe for too long. The next morning, Nicole left for work without mentioning our conversation from the night before. But when I came downstairs, I found a note propped against the coffee maker. Mom, I looked up that pottery studio. They have a beginner class starting next week. Maybe we can both try something new. Love you. I smiled and tucked the note into my travel journal, right next to the plane ticket that had started this whole adventure. 8 days until Paris. 8 days until I discovered whether I was as brave as Margaret had believed I could be. The week that followed was a whirlwind of preparation and nervous energy. Nicole, true to her word, had signed up for the pottery class, and I could see something shifting in her demeanor, a cautious excitement that reminded me of the little girl who used to build elaborate fairy houses in our backyard. The instructor says we'll start with basic pinch pots, she told me over dinner 3 nights before my departure. Nothing fancy, just learning to feel the clay and understand how it responds to pressure. That sounds lovely, I said, watching her face light up as she talked about it. Margaret would have loved that you're trying something creative, Nicole smiled. She always said I was too serious. Remember how she used to send me those crazy art supplies for my birthday? Glitter and finger paints and those weird marker sets that smelled like fruit. She wanted you to stay in touch with the part of yourself that wasn't afraid to make a mess. I think I forgot about that part somewhere along the way. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. It's not forgotten, just buried under years of being responsible. There's nothing wrong with being responsible, sweetheart, but there's also nothing wrong with letting loose once in a while. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was giving advice about letting loose while preparing for the most spontaneous thing I'd done in decades. 2 days before my flight, I had my final appointment with Dr. Patterson for a routine checkup and to get copies of my medical records to carry with me, just in case. I'd been seeing Dr. Patterson for 15 years, and she'd always been supportive of my independence. "Paris," she exclaimed when I told her about my trip. "How absolutely wonderful! I went there during my residency, 25 years ago. The medical museums alone are worth the trip. But honestly, just walking along the Seine at sunset is pure magic." "Nicole is worried about me traveling alone," I admitted. "She's concerned about my blood pressure medication and what would happen if I had some kind of medical emergency." Dr. Patterson looked at my chart, then back at me. "Evelyn, your blood pressure is well controlled with medication. You're in better health than many women 20 years younger. As long as you carry your medical information with you and know the location of the nearest hospital, which any good hotel concierge can tell you, there's no medical reason you can't travel anywhere you want to go." Her words were like a prescription for confidence. "Really? Really? In fact, I think travel is excellent medicine. New experiences, moderate walking, exposure to different cultures, all of those things are tremendously good for both physical and mental health. I have patients in their 80s who take solo trips to Southeast Asia. Age is not a disqualifier for adventure." That evening, Nicole helped me pack, which was both touching and nerve-wracking. She kept pulling items out of my suitcase and replacing them with what she considered more practical alternatives. "Mom, you don't need 3 different scarves, but they go with different outfits, and scarves are quintessentially Parisian. You need more comfortable shoes." I bought comfortable shoes, good leather walking shoes, and a pair of flats for evening. "What about this jacket? It's not very warm." "It's a layering piece. I have a warmer coat, too." Nicole held up my new red sweater, the one that made me feel like a different version of myself. "This is very bright. Margaret always said life was too short for boring colors." Nicole folded the sweater carefully and placed it back in the suitcase. "You're really doing this?" "I'm really doing this. And you're not scared." I considered lying, giving her the confident answer she probably needed to hear, but we'd been honest with each other all week, and I didn't want to stop now. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "But I'm more terrified of not doing it." Nicole sat down on the edge of my bed, watching me fold a pair of comfortable pants. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think I'm like Dad, practical and responsible and boring?" The question caught me off guard. "Nicole, your father wasn't boring. He was steady and reliable, and he loved us more than anything in the world. Those are wonderful qualities. But did he ever do anything just for fun? Just because it made him happy?" I thought about Harold. Solid, dependable. Harold, who had worked the same job for 30 years and read the same newspaper every morning and preferred vacation spots we'd been to before because he knew what to expect. "Your father's joy came from taking care of us," I said carefully. "From knowing that we were safe and provided for. That made him genuinely happy. But what about his own dreams? Did he have any?" I was quiet for a moment, remembering conversations Harold and I had had late at night when we thought Nicole was asleep. Dreams about opening a small bookstore, maybe traveling to Ireland to research his family genealogy, learning to play guitar like he'd wanted to do in high school. "Yes," I said finally. "He had dreams, But he always thought there would be time later, after you graduated college, after we paid off the mortgage, after retirement. He kept putting them off for some day. Nicole's eyes filled with tears. And then he died. And then he died. We sat in silence for a moment, both thinking about the man who had shaped our understanding of responsibility and love, and the weight of caring for other people. I don't want to be like that, Nicole said quietly. I don't want to spend my whole life waiting for someday. Then don't, I said simply. Take the pottery class. Plan a trip of your own. Ask out that man from accounting you mentioned last month. Whatever it is that makes you happy, stop waiting for permission to pursue it. Nicole smiled through her tears. His name is David, from accounting. Is he nice? Very nice. Funny and kind, and he grows orchids as a hobby, which is either charming or weird. I can't decide. Growing orchids sounds lovely and complicated. Anyone who can keep orchids alive probably has patience and attention to detail. Good qualities in a man? Good qualities in anyone. The morning of my flight arrived gray and cold, with the kind of November wind that cuts right through your coat. Nicole had taken the day off work to drive me to the airport, which was both thoughtful and completely unnecessary since I'd already arranged for a taxi. I want to see you off, she'd said when I protested. I want to be there when you do this brave thing. We drove in comfortable silence for most of the hour-long trip to Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. I watched the familiar landmarks of Virginia countryside roll past, the same roads I'd traveled for 63 years, and tried to imagine returning from this trip as a different person. Mom, Nicole said as we pulled into the departure terminal, I owe you an apology. For what? For treating you like you were fragile when you're actually one of the strongest people I know. For trying to manage your life instead of trusting you to live it. For saying that old women don't travel when what I really meant was that I was scared of being left behind. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. You weren't trying to hurt me, sweetheart. You were trying to protect me. Same thing, sometimes. Nicole parked and insisted on walking me to the security checkpoint, even though I told her she didn't need to. At the entrance to the TSA line, she hugged me tighter than she had since she was a little girl. Take pictures of everything, she said, and call me when you land. And don't talk to strange men in bars. I'm 63, not 16. Strange men in bars are dangerous at any age. I laughed. I promised to be careful, but I also promised to be brave. Good. Be both. The security line moved faster than I'd expected, and before I knew it, I was through the checkpoint and walking toward my gate. I turned back once to wave at Nicole, who was still standing at the entrance, watching me go. Gate B7 was bustling with travelers, business people typing on laptops, families with small children, college students with enormous backpacks. I found a seat near the window and pulled out my travel journal to write while I waited. November 15th, Sangs ng PM, sitting at the gate, waiting to board my flight to Paris. My hands are shaking, but not from fear, from excitement, from the knowledge that in 12 hours, I'll be walking down a street I've never seen, in a city I've only dreamed about. Nicole surprised me today, not just by driving me to the airport, but by apologizing. For the first time in years, I feel like she sees me as a person instead of a problem to be solved. Margaret would have loved that. I keep thinking about what Dr. Patterson said, that new experiences are good medicine. I've been feeling sick for so long, not in my body, but in my spirit. Sick of being small, sick of being careful, sick of living a life that feels like it's slowly shrinking around me. Maybe this trip is exactly the medicine I need. Now boarding Group 1 for Air France, Flight 54 to Paris, Charles de Gaulle. I looked at my boarding pass. Group 1, first class, Margaret's final gift to me. As I walked down the jet bridge, my heart was pounding so hard, I was sure the other passengers could hear it. The flight attendant greeted me with a warm smile and showed me to seat 2A, a window seat with more legroom than I'd ever experienced on an airplane. I settled in and looked out at the tarmac, where ground crews were loading luggage and making final preparations for departure. In a few hours, this plane would carry me across an ocean to a continent I'd never seen, to adventures I couldn't imagine. First time flying first class. I turned to see the woman in the seat next to me, probably in her 40s, well-dressed, with the confident air of someone who traveled frequently for business. First time flying anywhere, actually, I said. Well, Anywhere international. Her eyes widened. Really? How exciting. What's the occasion? I thought about how to answer that. How do you explain that you're 63 years old and finally learning to live your own life? My sister gave me this ticket before she passed away, I said. She wanted me to see Paris. What a beautiful gift. She sounds like she was an amazing woman. She was. She always said that life was meant to be lived, not endured. The flight attendant came by to offer champagne before takeoff. I accepted a glass, even though I rarely drank alcohol. It seemed like the right way to toast the beginning of an adventure. As the plane taxied to the runway, I pressed my face to the window and watched the lights of Washington, D.C. shrink below us. Somewhere down there, Nicole was probably driving home, maybe stopping at the pottery studio to see what she'd signed up for. Somewhere down there was my small, safe life, my house, my job at the library, my routine that never varied. And here I was, flying toward uncertainty at 35,000 feet, with a glass of champagne in my hand and 10 days of possibilities ahead of me. Ladies and gentlemen, we are cleared for takeoff. The engines roared to life, and I felt the plane surge forward with tremendous power. For a moment, we were suspended between earth and sky, and then we were airborne, climbing steadily into the dark November night. I pulled out my phone and sent Nicole a text. Wheels up, next stop, Paris. Thank you for believing in me. Love you. Her response came back almost immediately. You've got this, Mom. Make Margaret proud. Make yourself proud. I tucked my phone away and settled back in my seat, watching the lights below fade into darkness. In the reflection of the airplane window, I could see my own face, silver hair, reading glasses, laugh lines earned over 63 years of living. But for the first time in a long time, the woman looking back at me didn't look old. She looked ready for whatever came next. I woke up somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean to the gentle voice of a flight attendant offering breakfast. Through the small airplane window, I could see the first hints of sunrise painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold. My neck was slightly stiff from sleeping in an unfamiliar position, but I felt more rested than I had in months. Coffee or tea, madame? The attendant asked in accented English. Coffee, please, and thank you, as I sipped my coffee and watched the sunrise from 35,000 feet. I felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with my destination. I had spent 7 hours on an airplane without having a panic attack, without needing anyone to hold my hand or make decisions for me. I had slept peacefully above an ocean, trusting in the competence of strangers to deliver me safely to the other side of the world. Nicole's voice echoed in my head. Old women don't travel, but here I was, traveling and feeling more alive than I had in years. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport. Local time is 8:15 a.m., and it's a beautiful morning in the City of Light. My hands trembled slightly as I gathered my things and prepared for landing. This was it, the moment when this trip stopped being a dream and became reality. Charles de Gaulle Airport was enormous and bustling with people speaking languages I couldn't identify. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt energized by the chaos. I followed the signs to passport control, practiced my French phrases under my breath, bonjour, je suis touriste, merci beaucoup, and found myself smiling at the adventure of it all. The passport control officer was a stern-looking woman who examined my documents with professional efficiency. Purpose of visit, she asked in English. Tourism, I replied, then added in careful French, je visite Paris pour la première fois. Her expression softened slightly. Ah, première fois? Welcome to France, madame. Enjoy your stay. Merci beaucoup. I collected my luggage and made my way to the taxi stand, feeling proud that I'd navigated international customs without incident. The taxi driver was a chatty man in his 60s, who spoke excellent English and seemed delighted to have an American passenger. First time in Paris? He asked as we pulled away from the airport. Yes, and I'm a little nervous, I admitted. Ah, but why nervous? Paris is the most beautiful city in the world, perfect for first-time visitors. You will fall in love, I guarantee it. As we drove through the outskirts of the city and then into Paris proper, I pressed my face to the window like a child. The architecture was unlike anything I'd seen in Richmond. Ornate buildings with wrought iron balconies, tree-lined boulevards that seemed to stretch on forever, sidewalk cafes where people sat drinking coffee and reading newspapers as if they had all the time in the world. "There," the driver said, pointing ahead, "the Eiffel Tower," and there it was, rising above the city like something from a postcard, but real and solid and magnificent. I actually gasped out loud, which made the driver chuckle. "Wait until you see it at night," he said. "Every hour it sparkles like diamonds." The Hôtel des Grands Boulevards was everything the travel agent had promised. Elegant but not intimidating, with a friendly staff, and a lobby that managed to be both sophisticated and welcoming. The young man at the front desk spoke perfect English and greeted me warmly. "Madame Crawford, welcome to Paris. We have been expecting you. I am Philippe, and I will be happy to help you with anything you need during your stay." My room was on the 4th floor, with tall windows that opened onto a narrow balcony overlooking a bustling street below. It was smaller than my bedroom at home, but beautifully appointed, with antique furniture and fresh flowers on the writing desk. I unpacked slowly, hanging my new red sweater in the armoire and setting my travel guides on the nightstand. Then I opened the windows and stepped onto the balcony, letting the sounds and smells of Paris wash over me. Below, people hurried along the sidewalks, carrying baguettes and newspapers, talking on their phones in rapid French. A woman about my age walked by with a small dog on a leash, both of them moving with the unhurried confidence of locals who belonged exactly where they were. I could belong here too, I realized. Maybe not permanently, but for these 10 days, this could be my city, my adventure, my life. I pulled out my phone and called Nicole, as promised. "Mom, how was the flight? Are you okay? Did you find the hotel?" "I'm perfect," I said, and meant it. The flight was wonderful, the hotel is beautiful, and I can see the Eiffel Tower from my window. "Really? You can see it. Just a glimpse between buildings. But yes, Nicole, it's magnificent. The whole city is magnificent." "I'm so proud of you," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. "I'm sorry I almost talked you out of this. You were protecting me the only way you knew how. But sweetheart, I don't need protecting anymore. I need celebrating." After we hung up, I sat on my balcony for a few more minutes, watching the street below and planning my first day. The travel agent had recommended starting with a walking tour to get oriented, then visiting the Louvre in the afternoon when the crowds thinned out. But first, I wanted to do something simple and quintessentially Parisian, have coffee at a sidewalk cafe. I changed into comfortable walking shoes and my new red sweater, grabbed my purse and my phrase book, and headed downstairs. Philippe at the front desk recommended a cafe just 2 blocks away. "Café de la Paix," he said. "Very classic, very Parisian, perfect for your first morning." The walk to the cafe was an adventure in itself. Every building seemed to have a story. Every corner revealed something beautiful. Flower boxes overflowing with late-season blooms, shop windows displaying pastries that looked like works of art, elderly men playing chess at small tables in a pocket park. Café de la Paix was everything I'd imagined a Parisian cafe would be. Small round tables, cane chairs, a zinc bar where locals stood drinking espresso and reading newspapers. I chose a table on the sidewalk and tried to look like I belonged there. "Bonjour, madame," the waiter said. "Que désirez-vous?" I had practiced this moment. "Bonjour. Un café au lait, s'il vous plaît." "Très bien." When he brought my coffee, along with a small almond croissant, I hadn't ordered but didn't protest. I sat back in my chair and watched the world go by. An elderly couple walked past, arm in arm, speaking in musical French. A young mother pushed a stroller while balancing a phone call and a shopping bag. A businessman hurried by, checking his watch. Normal people living normal lives, but somehow made magical by the simple fact that they were doing it in Paris. I pulled out my travel journal and started writing. November 16th, 10:30 a.m. Sitting at my first Parisian café, drinking coffee that tastes like it was made by angels. I can't stop smiling. Every few minutes, I have to remind myself that this is real, that I'm actually here. A woman just walked by with the most beautiful scarf wrapped around her neck, in a way that looked effortless but probably took years to perfect. She was probably my age, maybe older, but she moved through the world like she owned it. I want to learn how to do that. Margaret would have loved this place. She would have ordered something adventurous and struck up a conversation with the couple at the next table. I'm not quite ready for conversations yet, but maybe by the end of the week. I keep thinking about what Nicole said, that I never change, that I always order the same thing, always stick to what's familiar. But I'm here, aren't I? I'm sitting in a cafe in Paris, thousands of miles from everything familiar, and I'm not scared. I'm exhilarated. The waiter returned to check on me. Everything is good, madame. Everything is perfect, I said in English, then added in French, tout est parfait. He smiled broadly. Ah, you speak French. Very good. My pronunciation was probably terrible, but his encouragement made me feel bold. I'm learning, I said. Je suis une étudiante. Excellent. Where are you from? Virginia. In America. Ah, America. Welcome to Paris. Is this your first visit? Yes, and it's even more beautiful than I imagined. Wait until you see Notre Dame, he said, and the Latin Quarter, and Montmartre at sunset. Paris has many gifts for those who take time to discover them. After finishing my coffee, I walked back to the hotel, feeling like I had already accomplished something important. I had navigated foreign streets, ordered in a foreign language, and had a conversation with a stranger. All things that Nicole would have said I couldn't handle. The walking tour that afternoon was led by an energetic young woman named Claire, who spoke 5 languages and had an infectious enthusiasm for her city. Our group was small, just 8 people, including a retired couple from Australia, 2 college students from Germany, and a businessman from Japan who was extending his work trip for a few days of sightseeing. Paris is not just a city, Claire said, as we stood on the Pont Alexandre III, looking out over the Seine. It is a collection of villages, each with its own personality, its own secrets. The key to understanding Paris is to slow down, to notice the details, to let the city reveal itself to you gradually. We spent 3 hours walking through different neighborhoods, learning about the history and architecture, stopping at hidden courtyards and tiny museums that tourists usually missed. By the end of the tour, I felt like I had been given a key to a secret world. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I ate dinner alone at a restaurant, not a fast, casual place where you order at a counter, but a real restaurant with white tablecloths and a wine list. I had researched it carefully, choosing a place that was welcoming to solo diners and had English-speaking staff. The hostess seated me at a small table by the window, and I ordered carefully from the French menu, asking for help with pronunciation when I needed it. The meal, coq au vin with roasted vegetables and a glass of Burgundy, was delicious, but more importantly, it was mine, my choice, my adventure, my small act of independence. As I walked back to my hotel that night, the Eiffel Tower came into view, and right on schedule, it began to sparkle with thousands of tiny lights. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, not caring that other pedestrians had to walk around me, and just stared. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I pulled out my phone and took a dozen pictures, then called Nicole. "Mom, how was your first day?" "Perfect," I said. "Absolutely perfect. I had coffee at a sidewalk cafe. I took a walking tour. I ate dinner alone at a French restaurant. And right now I'm watching the Eiffel Tower sparkle." "You ate dinner alone?" "I did. And it was wonderful. Nicole, I wish you could see this city. I wish you could see how it makes me feel alive. Maybe I can come visit sometime. Maybe we could travel together." "I would love that," I said, and meant it. But this trip, this first trip, needed to be just mine. I understand now. I really do. The next 9 days passed in a blur of discoveries. I took a cooking class and learned to make proper French pastries. I spent an entire afternoon in the Louvre, getting lost among the paintings and sculptures, sitting on benches and sketching in my travel journal. I took a day trip to Versailles and walked through gardens that had been designed for kings. I rode the metro like a local, figuring out the map and the ticket system through trial and error. I got lost in Montmartre, and found my way back using a combination of map reading and asking directions in broken French. I bought cheese and wine and fresh bread and had a picnic in Luxembourg Gardens, watching children sail toy boats in the fountain. Each day, I called Nicole and told her about my adventures. Each day, she seemed a little more amazed that her helpless mother was navigating a foreign country with increasing confidence. "You sound different," she said during one of our calls. "Your voice sounds stronger." I feel stronger. I feel like myself again, but a better version. On my last night in Paris, I splurged on dinner at a restaurant that Margaret had mentioned in one of her letters, a tiny place in the Latin Quarter known for its traditional French cuisine. I wore my red sweater and my new scarf, and I didn't feel self-conscious about dining alone. The owner, an elderly French woman with silver hair and kind eyes, stopped by my table to chat. "You are visiting from America?" she asked. "Yes, from Virginia. This is my first time in Paris." "Ah, and what do you think of our city?" "I think it's taught me that I'm braver than I knew," she smiled. Paris has a way of doing that. The city shows us who we really are, not who we think we should be. After dinner, I walked slowly back to my hotel, taking a longer route through neighborhoods I had grown to love. Tomorrow I would fly home to Virginia, back to my small house and my job at the library and my routine that had felt so limiting just 10 days ago. But I wouldn't be returning as the same person who had left. I spent my last morning in Paris sitting at the same cafe where I'd had my first cup of French coffee, writing in my travel journal, November 25th, my last morning in Paris. In a few hours, I'll be on a plane back to Richmond. But I'm not the same woman who left 10 days ago. I've learned that I can navigate foreign cities and foreign languages. I've learned that I can eat alone in restaurants and strike up conversations with strangers and find my way when I'm lost. I've learned that being alone doesn't have to mean being lonely. But most importantly, I've learned that Nicole was wrong. Old women do travel. We travel with wisdom and appreciation, and the knowledge that every experience is a gift. We travel without the need to prove anything to anyone except ourselves. Margaret knew this would happen. She knew that Paris wouldn't just show me the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower. It would show me who I could be if I stopped being afraid of my own capabilities. I'm going home, but I'm taking this version of myself with me. The woman who can plan international trips and navigate foreign airports and order wine with dinner without asking anyone's permission. I'm going home, but I'm not going back. The flight home was smooth, and I spent most of it looking through the hundreds of photos I'd taken and planning my next adventure. Maybe Italy, maybe Ireland, maybe somewhere I'd never even considered before. Nicole was waiting for me at the arrivals gate, and when she saw me walking toward her, her face lit up with genuine amazement. "Mom, you look radiant." "I feel radiant," I said, hugging her tightly. "I feel like I just remembered how to live." On the drive home, I told her about my adventures, showing her pictures and sharing stories. But more than that, I told her about the conversations I'd had with myself, the moments when I'd realized I was capable of far more than either of us had believed. "I'm sorry," Nicole said as we pulled into my driveway. "I'm sorry I made you think you were smaller than you are." "You didn't make me think anything," I said gently. I allowed myself to become smaller because it felt safer. But safe isn't the same as living. What happens now? I looked at my house, the same house I'd lived in for 36 years, but which no longer felt like a limitation. It felt like a home base, a place to rest between adventures. "Now I live," I said simply. "I plan another trip. I take more chances. I stop asking permission for joy." Nicole smiled. "And maybe I'll join you sometimes." "I'd love that. But first, how was your pottery class?" Nicole's face lit up. "Messy, frustrating, wonderful. I made the most lopsided bowl you've ever seen, but I loved every minute of it. And David from accounting, he stopped by to see how I was doing. We're having coffee next week. Growing orchids and making pottery. Sounds like a man who appreciates things that take time and patience to create. Like confidence," Nicole said. "Like courage, like second chances," I added. That night, as I unpacked my suitcase and put away my travel clothes, I found Margaret's note tucked into the pocket of my red sweater. "For Evie, because the world is waiting, and so are you." I smiled and placed the note on my dresser, right next to the small clay figurine I'd bought at a shop in Montmartre, a woman with silver hair and a confident smile, walking with purpose towards some unseen destination. Tomorrow I would go back to work at the library, back to my routine, back to my regular life, but I would go back as a woman who had proven to herself that old women do travel, that dreams don't have expiration dates, and that the most important journey you can take is the one that leads you back to yourself. I opened my laptop and started researching flights to Rome. After all, the world was waiting.